What are the fantasy implications if Pete Alonso doesn't stay with the Mets in 2026? And can Juan Soto be the outfielder number one this upcoming season? We're talking those names and more as we cover the Mets on today's action-packed episode of Locked On Fantasy Baseball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Baseball, your daily fantasy baseball podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fantasy baseball fanatics, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we're your number one source of fantasy baseball knowledge, and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. Solo today, as you can see if you're watching on YouTube, and if you are watching on YouTube and you haven't already, hit that little bell below. It's going to subscribe you to the channel and give you a notification every time we drop a new episode. Or if you're listening on the audio side of things and you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you could, if you're listening on a platform like Apple or Spotify that allows 5-star ratings and reviews, if you could, we truly appreciate it if you do that as well. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And all right, guys, we're talking the New York Mets today. Juan Soto, big season with the Mets over there. Love to see it. Can he be the outfielder number one in 2026? Francisco Lindor, steady Eddie, another great year for him as well. What do we think about him for next year? Alonso, do I think he's going to stay with the Mets? And if he doesn't, what does that mean for his fantasy value next season? Mark Vientos, big disappointment. Can he bounce back? The pitching, we got the old veterans in Kodai Senga and Clay Holmes, and then we got the young guns in Nolan McLean and Jonah Tong. And then we are going to cover the Mets' top prospect, Carson Benge. So that is the lineup for today's episode. So as you know, pitchers, second, bats first, and then we will, hit third with the top prospects, right? So let's start off. Let's talk about Juan Soto. First year, not in New York, but first year with the Mets, right? You can't be disappointed, if you took Juan Soto, on your fantasy baseball teams this past season, or if you had him keeper dynasty formats, pretty strong year for Soto, right? I don't know if I'm, you kind of actually you gotta give it to him with the 38 stolen bases, right? I was gonna say I'm biased. I'm a Yankees fan. I was gonna say, not better than the year with the Yankees because he had 288, but man. Soto still had a really, really strong year, right? So 160 games for Soto, 715 plate appearances, 577 at-bats, 120 runs, 20 doubles, a triple, 43 home runs, which is a career high for Soto, 105 RBIs, a career high by a wild amount, 38 steals for Juan Soto this past year, 127 walks, 237 strikeouts, and a 263 batting average. To answer my earlier question, no, I still won't be ranking Soto as the outfielder number one, but is he a top 3 outfielder? Undoubtedly. I think Juan Soto is just going to, he's aging well. He's aging well. I think a lot of us thought, after those first 3-4 years with the Nationals, that Juan Soto was going to be like a career 300 hitter with 30 bombs a year easily. And we didn't think that, we were going to see the struggles we've seen, where he struggled mightily with the Padres and hit, 236 when he first got over there in that second half of 2022. Struggled in the first half of the year with the Nationals that year, only hit 246, right? And then even his first full year with the Padres, 275. This past year with the Mets, 263. So I don't know if Soto's ever going to be the huge standout in the batting average department that we expected him to be in his earlier years. But I think it's undoubtable power, undoubtable runs and RBIs in this great Mets lineup. The steals, I mean, hey, listen, if he's going to go out there and be almost a 40-40 threat easily, a high-end first-round pick, I just don't think I'm taking Soto over Judge, me personally. I mean, if you want to take Soto over Judge, by all means. That's a redraft league. Keeper Dynasty startup format. Yeah, of course. Definitely taking Soto in over Judge in those formats. I'm going to pull up my way too early 2026 rankings, and I'll tell you where I have Soto at outfield. Like I said, I do believe it was, think it was second, just behind Judge, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I have him right behind Judge. I'm not going to mad if we want to do the 1A 1B thing with Judge and Soto, just because you might fancy the steals per se, right? I think Judge is going to have him in almost everything else. So not mad at that at all. So yeah, let's keep things pushing with Juan Soto there and move on to Francisco Lindor. Lindor, like I said at the top, he's just been so reliable. Last 4 years, very similar stats. He had a down 2021 and 2020. But prior to that, since coming up, Lindor, was pretty much the same guy that we see today, right? Lindor last season, we'll go through those numbers: 160 games played, 644 at bats, 117 runs, 35 doubles, 31 homers, 86 RBIs, 31 steals, 65 walks to 131 strikeouts, and a 267 average. Just what you're getting. He's been healthy. You hardly have to worry about a games played issue with a guy like Lindor. About as good as it gets when it comes to shortstop. I have Lindor as my shortstop number 2 going into 2026. Only got him behind Bobby Witt Jr. You could argue, I guess, Ellie De La Cruz if you want, but that's more of the upside play. For me personally, I like to have a lot of stability in my lineups when it comes to fantasy sports, whether not even just baseball, any football, basketball, whatever it may be. And just Lindor is one of those guys that is just, unless there's injury, it's guaranteed production. And it's just so hard to argue that, yes, Ellie De La Cruz could be that monstrous, scratch off card. But other than that, I really love what Francisco Lindor brings to the table, and it's all believable. The underlying stuff backs up everything that Lindor does. So we love it. We love it. Really not too much else to say there, right? So I think let's keep it moving. Let's move on to the polar bear himself, the big topic of discussion, Pete Alonso. Alonso, another good year. You can't really be mad at the numbers. Maybe, you hope for a little bit more power, but Alonso takes the step back the step back to being good. That's the way to phrase that, right? The step back to being good in the batting average department. And we've been honestly waiting 2 years for this, because Alonso had a really strong 2021 in the batting average department, hit 262. Followed it up in 2022 with a 271 batting average, 40 home run, 131 RBI season. Then 2023, 217, 46 homers. The power's still there, but the batting average drops off a cliff. 2024 bounces back to a 240 batting average, but still not the guy that we thought, Alonso was going to be at 34 home runs. This past year, 2025, Alonso 162 games, 624 at bats, 87 runs, 41 doubles, which is a career high, 38 homers, 126 RBIs, and 272 batting average, which is also a career high for Alonso, right? I don't know if the Mets are going to want to give him the contract that, he's going to get from maybe other teams. I think that they should. I think Alonso's going to wind up. I can't see it. I can't see a 10-year deal for a guy that's, going to be 31 next season. But then again, these teams give out some crazy deals these days. 7, 8 years, big time bucks. Premium, first baseman kind of money, and look at Judge, the contract's paying off so far for Judge. So I think that's what Alonso and them are going to do. I forget whether Alonso's, a Boris guy, right? Is he? Yeah, he is a Boris guy. So, Boris, the track record was really good for, getting guys the money. Has been a little sketchier over the past few years. So I don't know what's going to happen here. I think if he stays here with the Mets, fantasy impact, is pretty much the same. I think we get a 260 plus batting average with 35 plus home runs, really good runs and RBIs. If he leaves, it depends on the landing spot, right? Sometimes we see those first team, our first year new team jitters, and we don't necessarily get the production that we want or expect. But you know what? If he goes over to a good park, good team, it could be different. Once again, we're going to just have to wait and see where, Pete Alonso lands. So before we move on and we talk about the disappointing season of for Mark Vientos, and do we think he bounces back in 2026? And then we move into the pitching with Senga and Holmes, and then we got the young guns and McLean and Tong. Those names and more coming up next. And all right, guys, I want to talk to you about my friends over at Game Time. And listen, guys, the NFL season is back. And you know what? Honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But actually getting the tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees. It takes all the fun out of it. Me, personally, that's why I like to use Game Time. The app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. Fees are included. Know your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And guys, I was just on the app, before I started recording, I'm trying to get to a game, and I saw some great deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games as low as $100, right? And then I love the zone deals too. You pick the section and like Game Time, pick the seats, and you save big. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've ever bought tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. And all right, guys, let's just keep it going. Let's talk some Mark Vientos. And, this is one of those things I try to stress, a lot in any fantasy sport. Let's not overreact to, a small sample size. And not to say that 2024 on the season was a small sample size for Vientos, but he got so hot in the playoffs and everybody was riding that, emotional high of it. And, listen, 111 games, 413 at-bats, 27 bombs is great what we saw from Vientos in 2024. But people just say, oh, you add another 40 games on there and, that's 37, or 40 home runs. And that's just not how it works sometimes. And that's why I said, hey, we need to cut the brakes on, Vientos. I know Matt and I didn't have him ranked as high as he wound up going on draft day, which I'm pulling up now. Vientos wound up coming off the board as the 88th pick overall, the 8th third baseman, and it felt bad. It felt bad to me. Caminero was going right after him. Bregman was going right after that. You had Eugenio Suarez coming off the board as the 15th third baseman. And I was just like, and even though Josh Young wasn't, great this year, he was still going at pick 202. And, Max Muncy, who contributed this year, and Correa, who contributed this year, Michael Garcia was coming off the board as the 24th third baseman, pick 222. So it's just that I just didn't see the reason to pay that price for somebody who it was a lot of projecting, and it's always hard to buy into somebody doing something one time because it's not proven. Once you see them do it twice, okay, you can start to buy in a little bit more. And Vientos had some prospect pedigree, don't get me wrong. I didn't see it working out the way that a lot of other people did. We could even get into, some of the underlying stuff. Yeah, it really looked good for power, but when you scale it back, right, didn't look any good for batting average. And yeah, sure, hard hit rate was good, barrel percentage was good, average exit velocity was good. He wasn't getting the sweet spot numbers that we like to see. And this is Mark Vientos in 2024. We're talking about how he was projected coming into, this season. Didn't square the ball up well. The bat speed wasn't elite. Was chasing a lot, was whiffing a lot. And then it's just like, okay, so if Vientos is just going to hit 30 home runs and not really do too much else, what's the point of paying that high of a top 100 premium pick for him? And Vientos, what he wound up doing as a 25-year-old in 2025, 121 games played, 424 at-bats, 44 runs, 21 doubles, 17 home runs. So much for that power playing up, right? 61 RBIs, 233 batting average. Now, here's the thing. Vientos is going to fall from grace, as far as where we're going to be, drafting him in, 2026. As I pull up the roster resource, I kind of just want to see, where they have Vientos in this lineup come 2026. They have Vientos hitting fourth, but that's with no Pete Alonso. Listen, it could be a nice year where we buy back in, where the price isn't egregious, like it was like the 8th third baseman. I want to see where I slotted Vientos in. Honestly, it probably wasn't a friendly ranking. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I slotted Vientos in as the 16th third baseman. Now, maybe is that a little bit too low? Maybe, but honestly, I could see, because Eugenio Suarez, who had a monster year in 2023 going into, or 2024 going into 2025, was being drafted really low, was the 15th third baseman. I could see the same kind of thing for Vientos, maybe even lower. Who knows? So that's we're going to call that with the bats. Spent a lot of time over there already. Let's talk about Kodai Senga, man. Listen, this one was real interesting to me, because once again, we talk about this a lot with it's not just baseball, it's every sport, but it becomes the tale of two halves, right? For a guy like Senga, had a really good first half, but I know a lot of the guys who covered the Mets, and a lot of guys who deep dive a lot of the underlying stats a little bit further than someone like I typically does. We're saying, hey, this isn't sustainable. This isn't something that we see him doing for the full season. So I wasn't a big Senga guy going into the year. Didn't have a lot of shares, but let's break down the first half, second half. 14 starts in the first half for Senga, a 1.39 ERA. 77 innings pitched, 74 strikeouts. The whip was a 1.13. Second half for Senga, 8 starts, 6.56 ERA, 35 innings pitched, 35 strikeouts, a 1.71 whip, and he gave up 22 walks and 8 homers in those 35 innings. Has Senga lost it officially? I don't know. I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon and say he's totally cooked or, chopped, maybe, as these young kids are saying these days. But I think the thing with Senga is I won't want him on my team. Unless I'm getting him as one of my last starting pitchers. I think I'm just going to, I'll take the L if Senga has a monster year, right? I'll take the L. I think he's going to be one of those guys that everyone is going to just be like, oh, well, there's a chance, there's a will, there's a way. I think I'm going to be looking the other direction. And I'll tell you this. I've ranked at this point about 50 starting pitchers for 2026. Senga, not on the list, man. Has not made an appearance on that list yet. I just hate the horrible finish to the season, and I don't know if he regains that old form. We'll see how he looks in spring training, and then we'll talk about him more then. But we got to talk about some Clay Holmes. I'm super excited to talk about McLean and Tong. And then the Mets top prospect, Carson Benge, those names and more coming up next. And all right, guys, let's just keep it pushing here. Let's talk about Clay Holmes. And another guy, it wasn't the tale of the dramatic tale of two halves for Clay Holmes. But, he was a bit better in, the first half than the second half. But still just, I think just we'll take what Clay Holmes gave us in his first year as a starting pitcher, right? Makes the transition over from, the bullpen to a starter for the first time in his career, or at least the first time since his rookie season back when he made 4 starts back in 2018 with the Pirates. But Clay Holmes this year, 31 starts, 3.53 ERA, 12 wins, 165 innings, 129 strikeouts, a 1.30 whip, which was high. Clay Holmes was like one of the big risers in fantasy because he was having a monster spring training. So I don't want to say that the value was worth it because when I look at ADP, it tells me what Clay Holmes was the 70th starting pitcher off the board and pick 229. I want to say that Clay Holmes wound up being closer to pick like 200 come draft day. I'll say this. Is there a world where he's better and maybe he takes his little step forward in the right direction? It's possible. Something I'm not banking on. Another guy that like Senga I think is going to be overdrafted. I'm probably not going to have too many Clay Holmes shares. And let's just remember this. Now. If Clay Holmes goes out there and has another monstrous spring training, let's not jump him up draft boards and, expect a age 31 or 32, 33-year-old starting pitcher to, take a huge step forward. But I do think there is a world where he at least maintains similar production, like a mid-3s ERA, maybe a little bit closer to a K per 9. And, the whip just not being great. I think that's at least a solid expectation for Clay Holmes in 2026. It's really just going to depend on ADP, man. Because if we're getting him as the 70th starting pitcher again, sure, that's not a bad pick at all. He's going to, hurt you some starts. But for the most part, at least he'll be okay. Let's move into somebody. Let's get the excitement back up. Let's turn it back up a notch. Let's talk about Nolan McLean. I feel like we talked about him a lot at the end of the season, and he was just great. He was great down the stretch. 8 starts in the bigs for McLean, 2.06 ERA, 48 innings, only 16 walks, 57 strikeouts, a 1.04 whip. The underlying stuff backs McLean, what McLean did up. I think he is going to be one of those guys who we're all going to be excited to draft come draft day in 2026, and he's going to be jumped up draft board so much, man. Did I throw him into my rankings yet? I'll check. If I did, I probably have him too high. I'm not going to lie to you guys. McLean, probably. This might sound crazy, but top 30? Is he a top 30 starting pitcher going into 2026? Maybe, but that SP3, I think that's where I want to take him, SP3. So we'll talk about McLean. He has that nasty sinker that he leads with, averages 95 on that. Batters hit 193 against it in the bigs. Then he has a sweeper, which didn't get great results in the majors, but is a good pitch for him. Batters hit 361 against that in the bigs. Wasn't great. He guys got a big curveball, really nice curveball, which he throws 15 or 16% of the time. That one averages 80 miles an hour. Batters only hit 074 against that. 4-seam fastball averages 96 on that. Batters only hit 154 against it. The changeup, batters only hit 143 against that. And then even his cutter, batters only hit 250 against that pitch as well. So only one pitch that didn't perform well through his first 8 starts in the bigs. He's got the fastballs, got the sinker. Then he's got the good breaking stuff, and mixes in a nice changeup as well. So I really love what this kid Nolan McLean could do, and he's 6'2", 214, had, one of the big breakout seasons in the minors this year, as well as, the next guy we're going to talk about too, Jonah Tong. But let's talk about what McLean did in the minors. That was across 2 levels, which is AA and AAA. McLean made 18 starts down there, a 2.45 ERA, 113 innings, 127 strikeouts, a 1.12 WHIP. I think he's going to have a big breakout year as a 24-year-old for the Mets. And honestly, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And I think he's worth the price of an SP3 in a 12-man league. If he's getting pushed up higher than that, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be fun, to have to just, take him any higher than that. Let's move on. Let's talk Jonah Tong. Jonah Tong came up and did the exact opposite of what McLean did. Jonah Tong did a little poo-poo. And 5 starts, 7.71 ERA, 18 innings, 22 strikeouts, and a 1.76 WHIP. So just atrocious showing for Tong in the bigs. And I talked about McLean being one of the biggest breakout pitchers in the minors. Tong literally was. He had a huge season in the minors. 1.43 ERA over 22 starts in the minors for Tong. That's across, once again, AA and AAA. 113 innings, 179 Ks, and an 0.92 WHIP for Tong in the minors this past season. I think Tong is going to be one of those guys I want to take as a late dart throw. I think it was late in the season. I think maybe Tong might have been expecting the call a little bit sooner, and it just didn't happen. I can't give you a firm explanation on just why he didn't have any, thing when he got to the bigs. But I really think Tong is somebody, at only 22 years old this past season, 23, going to be 23 this next year. In 2026, I don't see why we can't buy in. I don't think the price is going to be high at all. I'm pretty sure he's going to crack this Mets rotation on opening day. I just want to double check what else they have going on there. Actually, maybe not. Maybe Tong doesn't, because it looks like they have Peterson, Holmes, Minaya, Senga. So I think the Mets give Tong the chance to fight for it in spring training. And I think there's even a scenario where Tong goes out in spring training and he's immaculate and he's great. And, the rest of these guys still kind of pitch kind of good. And the Mets like, oh, well, we have him under contract and, all that kind of, just baseball jargon, reasons that don't make any sense except for, financially and for the team. But I like Tong. I'm going to leave it at that. I still think he could be a really good starting pitcher for the Mets in 2026. And especially like a Minaya, Peterson, Holmes, Senga, that any one of those guys can get hurt in a start or two. So I think we keep Tong on the mind going into 2026. And let's finish things up with a top prospect like we always do on these team reviews and what we should be thinking about them from a fantasy standpoint in 2026. It's Carson Benge. Benge has been one of, we talk about the Mets and their prospects. Benge was another big riser this year. He's up to the 21st prospect in all of baseball right now. Across 3 levels, Carson hit 281 this past season. 116 games, 87 runs, 25 doubles, 7 triples, 15 homers, 73 RBIs. He had 68 walks, 92 strikeouts, and 22 steals. Now, Benge, more known for his hit tool. He's kind of quick as well. Does have some power, but the power is not like the elite thing that he is known for. I'd project Benge to be like, if I didn't mention the season outfielder, Benge, I project him to be like, in his prime, 150 games played, like a 30 steal, 15 bomb, some good counting stats. He's got pretty decent plate discipline, that I think he can get better with time. Like I said, 68 walks to 192 strikeouts, so pretty solid there. So with a guy like Bench, we definitely want to keep our eyes on him. He was the 19th pick in the 2024 draft in the first round. So definitely, like I said, somebody we want to keep our eye on going into 2026. Do I think he actually can make the roster out of spring training? It's going to be a tough one there because, it depends on what they want to do, right? It's Nimmo, Soto, Tyrone Taylor, and then they got Ronnie Mauricio at DH. So I think maybe there's a will, there's a way. If he comes out of spring training and he's just mashing, maybe we see him, crack that lineup out of spring training. But guys, that is all for today. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Baseball your first listen each and every day. Once again, shout out to our everydayers and listeners for doing that. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And guys, until next time, see ya.